Hello, it's coming up to 3 o'clock. Today is April the 15th, and today marks the 33rd anniversary of the Hillsborough disaster. And I know the families don't meet anymore as such at the ground as we used to, and people respect those who've gone in peace. I believe because it's the 33rd anniversary, I like to send a final shot across the bows of the authorities. He knows about numerology. 33 is considered a very magical number, because 32 degrees is freezing, 33 is thawing or knowing, and symbolic of becoming enlightened and aware. I have for 30 odd years been studying all aspects of the disaster, especially the peerless work of Professor Phil Scratton and his book Hillsborough, The Truth. I've also been studying all religions of the world and religious beliefs, spirituality, etc. The conclusion I've come to is this. Remember, back in 1989 we didn't really know or have anything apart from maybe President Kennedy being shot or men landing on the moon or not. However, since then, from 9/11, 7/7, terrorist attacks so-called, etc, etc, we've all seen the same things happening again and again. And what I'd like to say, with all due respect to those who've passed, to wish to let it go, is this: the Hillsborough disaster was not an accident. It was not a coincidence. It was not incompetence. It was a pre-planned, premeditated slaughter of the innocent, which was arranged and organised in advance. This day, April the 15th, there's also people mourning those who they've lost at the Boston bomb. You remember a few years ago, that was April the 15th. The Boko Haram full moon when all those women were kidnapped in Nigeria was April the 15th. Going back over 100 years, the Titanic sank, the loss of 1,000 lives, on April the 15th. President Abraham Lincoln was shot dead on April the 15th. I could go on. Well, the 16th, the 17th, you've had the Oklahoma bombing, Timothy McVeigh. We've had the Rockefellers slaughtering miners on April the 19th. It's always around this week. There's more carnage and destruction being caused on April the 15th than any other day in history. If you want to think this is a coincidence corner, that's up to you. It's not. It's not a coincidence. 2 weeks before Hillsborough, the man who was in charge of the semi-final in the same ground, with the same teams, the same stage of the same competition the year before, Chief Superintendent Mole, was shooed away, sent 200 miles away, and replaced by a duck and field. And it was said at the time this man only got his job, he hadn't even policed a pop concert before. He only got his job because he was in what they call the T-set. He was a Freemason. When we look at the so-called coincidences that occurred at Hillsborough, for example, the police said phone in. For 3 months, did phone in, tell us everything you know, and he's got any information. At the end of 3 months, they told us there were precisely 2,666 phone calls. Again, you probably think that's a coincidence. There was 1,122 policemen on duty at Hillsborough, 1122, most at the other end of the ground. Not what the disaster was. As we all know, the police booth was there, yards away from where everybody fell. They couldn't have had a better view. And I could go on, so I shall. When it took 20 minutes for anyone to call a ambulance, bear in mind it's the equivalent of a jumbo jet crashing with 100 dead, nearly 500 injured in a major city. It took 20 minutes for the police or anyone to ring the ambulance. When the first ambulance arrived, he was told, and I quote from court papers, turn away, they're still fighting. Another 10 minutes later, the second ambulance arrived, and against all rules, regulations and history, he parked sideways and took his keys. Apparently this never, ever happens. You're never told as an ambulance man to do this, so no one else could get in. He blocked the entrance. Now, in my opinion, the paramedics are peerless, quite flawless, and one of the best things about the NHS, these people rarely if ever make mistakes. But here we have, incompetence corner turns up just when they were most needed. There was a call, someone said, do nothing, or get it wrong. Then we had, for the first and only time in British history, legal history, we had blood and alcohol samples taken of the dead, even 10-year-olds. Clearly there was a preordained, pre-planned agenda, say they were all drunk. Then we had inquest after inquest after inquiry after inquiry. As anyone's been to court will know, you're not going to win, you're not meant to win. As soon as you go into court, you have lost. These people, Freemasonic judges and all the rest of it. And that vile man who turned up and said to the families of the dead, oh, I hope you're not going to be late, when he was the one late. This kind of thing all shows us what the agenda was. Hillsborough was a pre-planned, premeditated massacre and slaughter of the innocents, as we've seen many, many times on April the 15th throughout history. We had, of course, one Margaret Thatcher in charge of our country, a extreme right-wing Tory government who seems to be, you'll remember, at war with the poor, whether it was the miners, the dockers, the trade unions, etc. Cast your mind back to 1981 when we had the riots in Britain. After the ones in Toxteth in Liverpool, there was a meeting of the Conservative cabinet, and they said, what should we do about, quote, the Liverpool problem, the Liverpool question. And only recently the 30-year Secrets Act is up, and it's been revealed precisely what was said about what to do with the former second city of the empire. And what they said to do was, and I quote, leave it to managed decline. That was managed decline, or what's the difference between managed decline and pushing it over the edge? Well, what do all those scouts and all they care about is football? I'm sure we can fix something to do with that. The contempt they have for us is unbelievable. I'm going to say again, this was not an accident, this was not incompetence on the part of the police, this was set up to fail. We're coming up to 3 o'clock now to the time. I have a banner for the ground saying 15th to the 4th, 89. We remember and we know. We know. We're not stupid. And then we look at the fact that, for example, at 3:05, as we know from court papers, every single one of the police radios went down, bang, didn't work. Funny that, isn't it? Just in the very second that the first person died, all the police radios failed. Now, if you look at other things that have happened since then, like when Lady Diana was murdered in the tunnel, and all of the cameras in the Point Alma tunnel all failed for the one and only time in 20 years while her car went in there. You remember when Charles de Menez was shot dead in London by the police? All the cameras, all the films, all just happened to not be there. And you look at Hillsborough, all the phones, all the radios just went off. Just by coincidence, in Coincidence Corner. That's what they're telling you. This is all just a coincidence, just happens to be. And the next day, of course, Mrs. Thatcher is there, sneering on the terraces, turning up, congratulating, it seems to me. A job well done. I think it's a step too far, but these people who run our world are a step too far. And I think out of respect for all those who've fallen and the many tens, hundreds of thousands of people affected by the disaster that you don't hear about, I believe this must come out. I'm very respectful for all those who've lost loved ones or been affected, and I think it's time, 33 years later, to fight back and just to point out, we remember and we know.